The first thing I hear is a heart monitor. The second is my own breath, shallow, sharp, wrong. I blink into the hard light of an Austin, Texas hospital room, ribs caged in bandages, leg pinned, throat dry as paper. The door swings open. Daniel, my husband of 10 years, walks in wearing a blazer I've never seen and a smile I don't recognize. He isn't alone. The woman on his arm is younger, glossy, and for one nauseating second I think I'm looking into a mirror from 15 years ago. Rachel, he says softly, like he rehearsed it. You're awake. We've been so worried. She lowers her sunglasses. Same eyes. Same jawline. Same way of pressing her lips when she's bracing for bad news. My pulse hammers, the monitor tattles on me. Daniel pulls out a neat stack of papers. Doctors say recovery will be long, he murmurs, fingertips tapping the signature line. Let me handle things. Sign, and you won't have to think about the money. The money. 2 months ago, I inherited $15 million from my Aunt Eleanor, the woman who taught me summers taste like peaches and that Napa sunsets can make you forgive anything but a lie. I called Daniel from the curb outside the attorney's office on Congress Avenue. He said he was mid-session, that Nashville studio time wasn't cheap, that we'd talk later. We never talked. On I-35, the rain came fast. A tractor-trailer jackknifed 3 lanes over. Steel screamed. Glass bloomed. The world went black. I woke up here. Days passed. No flowers. No calls. Just a text I keep replaying in my head, I've moved on. Don't contact me. A friend whispered about a memorial service in our apartment, while I was breathing on this bed. Back to the room. Back to Daniel. Back to the woman who looks like a history I've tried not to remember. He nudges the paperwork closer. Trust me, he says. You're in no condition to manage 15 million. I look from his face to hers. My voice is a rasp, but it's steady. Who are you to him? She opens her mouth, then closes it. Her fingers fumble in her purse and come out with a creased photograph, a teenage girl, terrified and stubborn, cradling a newborn. My breath stops. The room tilts. Oh my God, she whispers. Rachel. I think you're my mother. The monitor spikes. Daniel's smile cracks. If you think money makes people kind, let me show you what it really does. Stay with me, because this is the part where everything they planned falls apart, and everything I lost finds its way back. Before that hospital bed. Before the crash. Before the papers Daniel shoved in my face, there was Eleanor. My Aunt Eleanor was my father's sister, a storm of a woman who built her fortune with nothing but grit, wine, and an instinct for timing. She owned Golden Crest Vineyards in Napa Valley, and when you stood on her porch at dusk, you could see the hills ripple in shades of fire and lavender. But the Carters and the Westons hadn't spoken in 20 years. My father accused her of cheating him out of a family investment, she called him reckless and entitled. Their feud became a tradition. Weddings, funerals, holidays, we sat on opposite ends of rooms, pretending we weren't kin. And yet, as a child, those rare summers the first spent with her felt like stepping into another world. I remember chasing fireflies through the vineyard rows, Eleanor laughing with a glass of Cabernet in hand, telling me that life was about creating your own taste, not swallowing what people pour for you. I didn't see her much after high school. I went off to the University of Texas, chased a career in marketing, and tried to carve out my own place. But somewhere in the middle of spreadsheets and deadlines, I married Daniel. We met at a gallery in downtown Nashville. He had a guitar slung over his back, paint on his jeans, and a way of talking about art like it was oxygen. He told me chaos was beauty in disguise, and I believed him. Back then, we had nothing, just a one-bedroom walk-up with peeling linoleum and a second-hand couch. I worked at an ad agency, late nights and early mornings, while he chased auditions and small gigs. He promised me he was on the brink of something big. I promised him I'd believe it until it came true. For a while, it was enough. Love filled the gaps that money left open. But over time, the rejections piled up. His charm dulled into temper. Nights out networking became whole weekends gone. When I asked where, he said I didn't understand the process. Our bank account told me enough. And then, 6 months ago, a cousin called. Aunt Eleanor was in a hospital bed in Napa, frail and fading. Against my father's bitterness, I went. The moment I walked in, her eyes lit up. "Rachel," she whispered, voice thin as paper. "I knew you'd come back." I kept coming back. Week after week, until her laughter started filling the sterile air of that room. We talked about everything: politics, poetry, regrets. Never once about the feud. She said grudges were poison disguised as pride. And just like that, I had family again. I didn't know that with every visit, she was revising something far bigger than I imagined, her will. When the lawyer slid that document across his desk in Austin, naming me sole heir to $15 million and the entire vineyard estate, my first thought wasn't of money. It was of possibility. Of freedom. Of finally telling Daniel we didn't have to scrape anymore. I bought him a watch that afternoon, a sleek, black Omega. It was supposed to be the beginning of a new chapter. I never made it home. I left the attorney's office with that inheritance letter pressed against my chest like it might disappear if I let go. $15 million. 15 years of sacrifice suddenly erased with a single signature. The sky over Austin was darkening, clouds tumbling in heavy gray folds. A soft rain began to slick the pavement, making the neon signs along Congress Avenue shimmer like wet paint. I ducked into a jewelry shop on the corner, the Omega still glinting in its case. I thought, this is it, the symbol of a fresh start. I called Daniel as I slid behind the wheel. "Hey," I said, forcing brightness into my voice. "I'm coming home early. I have something big to tell you." His voice was distracted, sharp around the edges. "I'm in the middle of something, Ratch. New track. Experimental. You wouldn't get it. Daniel, this is important. I'll be home in 30 minutes. "Fine," he muttered. "Just, don't expect much of a reaction." I'm in my zone. I hung up with a hollow pit in my stomach. Still, I pictured it. I'd place the watch in his hands, then whisper the truth. We were free. He'd pull me close, the weight would lift, and maybe, just maybe, we'd find our way back to who we used to be. But fate doesn't wait for perfect timing. The rain thickened as I merged onto I-35, wipers straining against the downpour. The highway lights stretched like streaks of molten gold across the wet asphalt. I turned the radio up, something upbeat, something to match the heartbeat of my daydream. Then it happened. A tractor-trailer 2 lanes over shuttered, swerved, and jackknifed it across traffic. The screech of steel and rubber tore the night open. The trailer swung like a pendulum straight into my lane. Time fractured. I yanked the wheel, but too late. The impact was a roar of crushing metal. Airbags detonated, choking me with smoke and powder. Glass erupted, tiny stars slicing the dark. The watch box flew open, the Omega tumbling across the dash in slow motion, as if mocking me. The last thing I saw before blackness swallowed everything was a billboard glowing through the rain. Protect what matters most. When I woke, the world was antiseptic white and the steady beep of a heart monitor. Broken ribs. A shattered leg pinned with metal rods. Stitches tracing my skin like cruel constellations. 2 days had passed. 2 days without Daniel. The nurse, a kind woman named Sarah, told me they'd called my emergency contact. Left messages. No response. Maybe his phone died, she said gently. But her eyes said otherwise. By the 4th day, I couldn't bear the silence anymore. I called him myself. My hand shook against the hospital phone, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. He answered on the 3rd ring, music thumping in the background. "Rachel?" he said, annoyed. "I've been in the hospital for 4 days. I almost died. Where are you?" A pause. A long, loaded pause. Then his voice, colder than the rain on that highway. I don't have time, or money, for a loser, Rachel. Some of us are moving forward. Click. The line went dead. And with it, the marriage I thought was unbreakable. I stared at the dead phone in my hand, the dial tone still echoing in my ears. My body ached from fractures and stitches, but the ache in my chest was far worse. Sarah, the nurse, found me trembling an hour later. She didn't ask, she just pulled up a chair and stayed. People show you who they are when you're at your weakest, she said softly, adjusting my fore. Believe them the first time. I wanted to believe Daniel was just scared. Overwhelmed. Anything but what his words had sounded like. But the signs were everywhere. Day after day, no calls. No visits. When I scrolled through social media on Sarah's tablet, I found him, smiling at Artemis Gallery, Nashville's elite art club. His caption read, "Celebrating new beginnings. New beginnings." While I lay in a hospital bed, broken and alone. My best friend, Emily, came by on the 7th day with a bouquet of daisies and a guilty look. She avoided my eyes when I asked about Daniel. Her excuses fell flat, something about him being busy with a project. Emily, I pressed, my voice raw, what aren't you telling me? She twisted the stems of the flowers until petals fell to the floor. Rachel, there was a service. A memorial service. Daniel told people you didn't survive the crash. The words hit harder than the truck. A memorial. For me. While my heart still beat under these hospital sheets. Why? I choked out. Emily's eyes shimmered with tears. He said he needed closure. That he was moving on. Moving on. 2 words that hollowed me out. That night, I couldn't sleep. The monitors ticked, the morphine haze swirled, but nothing dulled the sting of betrayal. When my body finally surrendered to exhaustion, I woke to Sarah at my side, concern etched into her face. You need strength, Rachel, she said. Not for him, for yourself. But strength felt like a stranger. On the 10th day, my suspicion turned to certainty. Another post appeared online, Daniel again, this time with a woman. Young. Stylish. Her arm looped through his. Champagne glasses in hand. And my breath caught. It wasn't just that she was beautiful. It was the way she looked. The curve of her jaw. The eyes that could have been mine years ago. A mirror of my past self. The caption, to forever. And in that moment, the pieces began to twist into something darker. Daniel hadn't just abandoned me. He had replaced me. But why did she look so much like me? And why, staring at her face glowing on the screen, did something deep inside me whisper a truth I'd spent 17 years trying to bury? Emily came back 2 days later, this time without flowers. She looked like she hadn't slept, her eyes rimmed red. Rachel, she whispered, glancing over her shoulder as if someone might be listening. I shouldn't be here. But you need to know the truth. Her hands fidgeted in her lap before she finally blurted it out. Daniel's not just with her. He married her. Last weekend. At the courthouse. The words didn't make sense. My pulse thudded in my ears. Married? My voice cracked on the single syllable. I'm not dead. I know, Emily said quickly, tears spilling over. But he told everyone you didn't make it. He even held a small memorial at your apartment. Rachel, I thought it was insane, but, he's convincing. And she believed him. Who is she? I demanded, my nails biting into my palms. Her name was Sophie Miller. 24. An assistant at Hayward Gallery in Nashville. Met Daniel 3 months ago. 3 months. The same time Aunt Eleanor's health had started to collapse. Emily hesitated, then pulled out her phone. There's something else. She turned the screen toward me. Sophie, smiling beside Daniel, a champagne flute raised. And that face, God, that face, stared back at me like a ghost I couldn't outrun. I froze. My stomach twisted. She looked like me. Not just similar, uncannily like me. The same sharp cheekbones. The same almond eyes. Even the same habit of pressing her lips when nervous. I don't, my throat closed. Why does she look like? I don't know, Emily whispered. But people are talking. They say Daniel told her you were family. That you were gone, and he wanted to take care of her. Rachel, it's sick. It's twisted. My heart monitor spiked so loud a nurse rushed in. I waved her away, but inside, panic clawed at me. Because deep down, I knew why Sophie looked like me. 17 years ago, I'd buried a secret so deep I prayed it would never surface. A secret I carried alone as a terrified teenager. And now, staring at Sophie's face glowing on Emily's phone, I realized that secret might have just walked back into my life, hand in hand with my husband. The knock came just past 2 o'clock. Sharp. Too casual to be a nurse, too bold to be a friend. Sarah, my nurse, glanced at me. Do you want me to? Let him in, I whispered, forcing steel into my voice though my hands trembled. The door opened. Daniel strolled in like he owned the place, a new designer blazer hugging his shoulders, his hair freshly styled, a glinting watch at his wrist. He looked nothing like the struggling artist I'd once carried. He looked rehearsed. And he wasn't alone. Sophie stepped in behind him, tentative at first. Dark hair spilling over a designer dress, nervous fingers tracing the strap of her purse. When her eyes met mine, something flickered across her face. Confusion? Fear? Recognition? Rachel, Daniel breathed, too theatrically, like an actor overplaying his role. You're awake. We've been so worried. We. The word sliced through me. I sat up straighter, ignoring the stabbing pain in my ribs. Strange, I said, voice low. Because you didn't answer my calls. You told the world I was dead. His smile faltered for half a second before he recovered. A misunderstanding. The doctor said you might not make it, and I was grieving. People misinterpreted. Grieving. While he married someone else. Sophie shifted beside him, her eyes darting between us. She opened her mouth, but Daniel's hand brushed her arm, a silent warning. He pulled a stack of papers from his blazer and laid them on the tray at the foot of my bed. The doctors say recovery will take months. Stress could slow your healing. Let me handle things for now. Just sign. I'll manage the estate, the money. You can focus on getting better. I stared at the signature line. At his smug composure. At Sophie's pale face. The 15 million? I asked, my voice sharp as glass. That's what this is about. Daniel's smile thinned. It's about protecting you. But in his eyes, I saw it, the cold calculation. The same look he gave unfinished canvases, deciding whether they were worth saving or burning. And then Sophie spoke. Her voice shook, but the words came out like a blade slipping free. She's not supposed to be alive, Daniel. You said. His head snapped toward her. Enough. But it was too late. The monitor beside me spiked, my pulse hammering as the air in the room shifted. Whatever game Daniel thought he was playing, Sophie had just cracked it open. And for the first time since the crash, I knew, this wasn't just betrayal. It was conspiracy. The silence after Sophie's words was heavier than the machines surrounding me. Even Sarah, who had been standing near the door, froze mid-step. I locked eyes with Sophie. What did you just say? My voice was raw, but steady. Her face crumpled. She glanced at Daniel, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. He just hissed through his teeth, don't. But Sophie's hands were already fumbling inside her purse. When they came out, they carried a photograph. Old. Creased. The edges curled like it had lived in too many pockets, too many nights pressed under a pillow. She held it out to me, trembling. I didn't want to take it. Something in me knew exactly what it was before my fingers even touched the faded paper. A girl, barely 18, her face blotched with tears, hair a mess, sat clutching a newborn. Eyes swollen, lips pressed tight like she'd been forced into silence. The girl was me. My chest tightened so violently I thought my ribs might crack again. "Where did you get this?" I whispered. "It was the only thing I had," Sophie's voice broke. "It came with me when I was adopted. They told me it was my birth mother's picture. I've carried it every day since." Blood roared in my ears. The beeping monitor betrayed my racing heart. Daniel lunged forward, trying to snatch the photo, but Sarah stepped in his way, her hand raised like a shield. "Not another step." Sophie's eyes brimmed with tears as she turned back to me. "Rachel. I think you're my mother." The world tilted. I gripped the bed rails, every nerve in my body screaming. Memories I had buried 17 years ago ripped back open, the hushed arguments in my parents' kitchen, the shame in my father's eyes, the way they sent me to live with an aunt across state lines to hide the pregnancy. The night I was forced to sign the papers. The way they took her from me before I even had a chance to whisper goodbye. I had told myself she was gone forever. That erasing her was the only way I could survive. But she wasn't gone. She was here. Standing in front of me. Daniel's hand clamped down on Sophie's shoulder, his voice venomous. "Stick to the plan. She's confused. This changes nothing." But Sophie shrugged him off, shaking her head in disbelief. "You used me. You knew. You knew who she was." I looked at Daniel then, really looked. And for the first time I saw him not as the man I once loved, but as the predator he had always been, circling, waiting for his moment. And now, that moment was slipping out of his hands. The photograph shook in my hands, my tears blurring the edges. My daughter. My own blood. Alive, grown, standing in this very room. But before I could speak, Daniel snapped. His voice turned sharp, cutting through the tension like a blade. "This is ridiculous. She's confused. You're all confused. Rachel, you've been drugged for weeks, you don't know what you're saying." "Stop lying," Sophie spat, her voice trembling but fierce. "You told me she was gone. That she wanted nothing to do with me. You said marrying you would honor her memory. All of it was a lie." Sarah's hand tightened on the call button at her hip, ready to summon security if he made one wrong move. I looked at Daniel, my chest heaving. "You knew she was mine. You found the box. Didn't you?" For a split second, his eyes flickered, the only confirmation I needed. That wooden memory box I'd hidden years ago. The hospital bracelet. The tiny knitted cap. That same photo Sophie now clutched like a lifeline. "You planned this," I whispered, horror rising in my throat. "You used her. You tried to erase me." Daniel slammed his hand against the foot of the bed, making the tray rattle. "You think anyone's going to believe your version? You're weak, broken, medicated. I've already told the world you're dead. And when you finally do die, no one will question it." The room went still. His mask had slipped completely now. No more charm. No more gentle artist facade. Just the predator exposed. Mark Hudson, Aunt Eleanor's attorney, stepped out from the corner where he'd been waiting silently, my insurance. His briefcase clicked open, and he pulled out a tablet. With one tap, video filled the screen, Daniel, standing in Mark's office days earlier, presenting forged death certificates and claiming next of kin rights. "Enough," Mark said firmly, his voice calm, authoritative. "We have everything we need. Every document. Every signature. Every word recorded." Daniel's face drained of color. "You set me up," he hissed, his gaze snapping to me. "No," I said, my voice steady for the first time in weeks. "You set yourself up. I just stopped closing my eyes." Sophie pulled away from him, tears streaking her face. "You never loved me. You never loved her." All you cared about was the money. Daniel's jaw clenched, fury twisting his features. For the first time, he looked less like the man I married and more like a cornered animal. Outside the door, heavy footsteps echoed, security closing in. And in that moment, I knew the charade was over. The door burst open. 2 uniformed security officers stepped inside, their presence filling the sterile room with a new kind of gravity. Daniel spun, wild-eyed. This is absurd. You can't just arrest me based on her word, she's delusional, she's drugged. Mark's voice cut through the chaos, calm and steady. Not just her word. We have documents. Recordings. Witnesses. And now a confession, Daniel. You walked right into it. Daniel's face contorted, his charm shattered, his mask gone. You think you've won? You don't understand how the world works, Rachel. Money doesn't save people like you. It destroys them. I met his glare, my voice hoarse but unwavering. No, Daniel. It just revealed you. The officers moved in. Daniel tried to jerk away, but they grabbed his arms, twisting them behind his back. Sophie flinched when he turned on her, his voice a venomous hiss. You think she cares about you? You're just leverage. Without me, you're nothing. Sophie recoiled as if he'd struck her. Tears spilled freely down her face. Enough, I snapped, my voice sharp, commanding even from the hospital bed. You don't get to hurt her anymore. For a moment, he stopped struggling. His eyes met mine, and I saw the truth I had ignored for years, the selfish hunger, the emptiness behind his gaze. He never loved me. He never loved anyone. The officers dragged him toward the door, his voice echoing down the hall. This isn't over, Rachel. You'll regret this. And then, silence. The room seemed to exhale. My pulse steadied, the heart monitor slowing. Sarah placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. It's over, she said softly. But it didn't feel over. Not yet. Because across the room, Sophie stood frozen, clutching that worn photograph to her chest. Her lips trembled as she whispered, almost to herself. All my life. I wanted to know who my mother was. And now, this? Her eyes met mine, searching, aching. I reached out a trembling hand. I'm so sorry, I whispered. For everything you've been dragged into. For everything you lost because of me. She hesitated. Then, slowly, she stepped forward. Her fingers brushed mine, tentative, fragile, but real. In that single touch, I felt both the weight of 17 years of silence and the fragile hope of something new. I had lost a husband. But maybe, just maybe, I had found a daughter. The days after Daniel's arrest blurred into a haze of police statements, legal meetings, and the kind of exhaustion that seeps into your bones. But through it all, Sophie stayed. At first, our conversations were awkward, circling each other like strangers who shared a scar. She sat by my hospital bed, fingers twisting that photo until the edges frayed even more. I tried to find words that would explain 17 years of silence, but there are no words big enough to cover that kind of absence. When the doctors finally cleared me for discharge, the question of where loomed heavy. I couldn't go back to the apartment Daniel had poisoned with lies. Hotels weren't practical, not when I still needed daily therapy for my leg. It was Sophie who said it first. What about Napa? The vineyard. It's yours now, isn't it? The thought startled me. I hadn't set foot on Golden Crest in over a decade, not since Eleanor's health began to fade. But the more I considered it, the more it felt right. That estate wasn't just money, it was legacy. A place to heal. And maybe, a place to begin again. So, 2 weeks later, with Sophie driving, we made the journey west. The city lights of Austin gave way to long stretches of desert highways, and eventually, rolling hills and neat rows of vines that stretched to the horizon. When we pulled into the circular drive, the house rose up before us, grand, weathered, waiting. White columns framed the porch, the windows catching the last streaks of sunset. I felt something in my chest loosen for the first time since the crash. Sophie's eyes widened as she stepped out of the car. "It looks like something out of a storybook," she whispered. Inside, the house smelled faintly of oak and dust. Mark had arranged for renovations, ramps, grab bars, a temporary bedroom on the ground floor. Practical touches that made the mansion feel less like a relic and more like a sanctuary. That night, we ate takeout pizza on the kitchen counter, surrounded by unopened boxes and echoes of the past. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't planned. But as Sophie laughed, really laughed, for the first time since I'd met her, I realized it was perfect. The vineyard became our classroom. Our therapy. Our bridge. I learned she liked to hum when she cooked, always slightly off-key. She learned I couldn't start the day without coffee and silence. We started traditions: Sunday movie nights, Thursday experiments in the kitchen, long walks through the rows of vines where Eleanor once taught me how to tell Cabernet from Merlot by scent alone. Each moment was a stitch in something fragile but real. A new kind of family quilt, pieced together from broken threads. For the first time in months, I felt something close to hope. But rebuilding isn't the same as forgetting. Every night, when the house grew quiet, guilt still whispered, 17 years, Rachel. You let her grow up without you. And every morning, when I woke, I told myself the same thing: you can't change the past. But you can choose what to do with now. The vineyard was quiet in the mornings, dew clinging to the vines like tiny diamonds. I often found myself wheeling slowly along the rows, Sophie walking beside me, our conversations meandering as easily as the dirt paths. At first, the silence between us was heavy, 17 years of questions hung unspoken. But piece by piece, we began to unravel them. One evening, sitting on the porch as the sun bled into the horizon, Sophie finally asked, "Why didn't you fight for me?" Her voice was steady, but her eyes glistened. The question pierced deeper than any broken bone. I was 18, I admitted, my voice shaking. Scared. Alone. My parents wanted the scandal gone, and I didn't have the strength to fight them. They told me giving you up was the only way you'd have a chance. I told myself it was mercy. But the truth? I swallowed hard. It was fear. And I've regretted it every day since. Sophie's lips trembled, but she didn't look away. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out that same photograph, the girl I had been, the baby she had been. She held it between us like a bridge. You gave me away, she said softly. But you also gave me life. My adoptive parents, they were good to me. They loved me. But a part of me always wondered where I came from. Now, at least, I know. Tears blurred my vision. Can you forgive me? She hesitated, then placed the photo in my hand. I don't need to forgive you, Rachel. I just need you now. It was the first time she called me by my name, not as a stranger, not as an accusation, but as someone she was choosing to keep. From then on, healing wasn't a goal. It was a practice. We planted a small garden together, Sophie's hands in the dirt while I steadied the seedlings with my crutch. We hosted Mark, Sarah, even Emily on weekends, filling the old house with voices and laughter instead of secrets. I started writing again, not reports or ad copy, but pieces of my own story. Words poured out like water breaking through a dam. Pain, betrayal, loss, and slowly, resilience, hope, love. Sophie would peek at my drafts, teasing me for being too dramatic, though her tears always betrayed her. And every court date, every update from Mark about Daniel's case, I grew stronger. Not because the system was punishing him, but because I no longer needed him to define my worth. I hadn't just survived. I was rebuilding. And for the first time, I believed I wasn't doing it alone. 1 year to the day after the crash, the vineyard was alive again. Rows of vines stretched green and endless under the California sun, and the house that once echoed with silence now hummed with voices. Mark brought his wife. Sarah, the nurse who had held me together in my darkest nights, sat at the table beside Emily, laughter spilling between them. Sophie's adoptive parents arrived with warm hugs, welcoming me not as a rival but as an addition to their family. We shared food. We shared stories. And for the first time in my life, I felt something I hadn't even realized I was missing: wholeness. When the plates were cleared and the glasses of wine raised, I stood on the porch and looked at the faces gathered before me. All of them pieces of the journey, through betrayal, through grief, through fire. "I want to make a toast," I said, my voice strong, steady. "To unexpected journeys. To the people who show up when others walk away. And to second chances, because sometimes, the life you're meant to live doesn't start until the one you thought you had falls apart." Sophie slipped her hand into mine, squeezing gently. And in that simple gesture, I knew the toast wasn't just words. It was truth. Because the accident that nearly killed me also stripped away every illusion I clung to. The husband I thought I loved showed me what greed looks like unmasked. But my daughter, the child I once lost, showed me what love looks like when it's found again. Money didn't save me. It didn't fix me. It only revealed who was real and who wasn't. True wealth isn't numbers on a page, it's people. The ones who stay. The ones who choose you even when you have nothing left to give. I lost a husband. I lost illusions. But I gained a daughter. And I gained clarity. As the stars broke open across the Napa sky, Sophie leaned against me and whispered, "Do you ever regret it? All of it, the accident, the betrayal, the pain?" I thought about it, really thought about it, before answering. Regret means I'd undo it. And I wouldn't. Because it brought me back to you. She smiled through her tears, and in that moment I understood something I wished I had known years earlier. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives are just doorways to the best ones. So if you're listening now, if you've ever been betrayed, abandoned, or broken, remember this: pain can end chapters, but it can also open books you never thought you'd get to read. And sometimes, you have to survive the crash to finally find your way home.